Building a great company is a marathon, not a sprint. Each week, Krista Inkeman and the team at Tank New Media take on growth challenges, explore technology, and interview business leaders that are always upping their game. If you're ready to build scalable systems to drive your business forward, this podcast is for you.
Hi, everyone. I want to welcome John Pszenny from HubSpot. He is a principal channel consultant with HubSpot, working with primarily gold, platinum, and diamond partners. He's been doing that for about 4 years now. Prior to that, he was actually sitting in a similar seat to me. He ran an inbound agency for a while with one of his colleagues that worked with attorneys. And kind of a fun fact about him as well is he has a passion project of stand-up comedy. So we'll see if he cracks any good jokes today. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this and be working with you guys in general. But yeah, thanks for setting that tone early on the jokes.
Just want to set those expectations high.
Climb back from that one.
Well, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the marketing and sales gap, which is something that you probably see a lot working with a lot of partners at HubSpot. For those of us who don't know kind of what we're referring to, can you just talk a little bit about what the marketing and sales gap is? Yeah,
and it's definitely a topic I nerd out on a lot. I actually did a whole presentation on it, or was a piece of it at this conference I spoke at in June, which was super fun. But the marketing and sales gap is this systemic sort of, you see it in most businesses. It's, to terribly quote Beauty and the Beast, it's a tale as old as time. I hate that I just did that, but we did it.
Oh, that's staying in too.
But it's a very common sort of pull of your two main departments in business of sales and marketing, and there's a lot of symptoms and sort of like variables are involved that kind of causes this chasm between the two. But it's that pain that folks feel in their businesses of their sales team sort of doing one thing and their marketing team being drawn to do another, and them not really aligning and communicating with each other, and that causing some disruption within your business.
So can we dive just a little bit more into kind of what causes this tension or disruption?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of variables involved in it. I'd say the main ones that I see and that I like to point out to, as far as like areas where we can make strides and make changes to help bridge that gap, is definitely communication between the two. That's probably the flagship one. It's how are we kind of creating a systemic sort of repeatable process where the two parts of the company are speaking to each other, and are they incentivized to speak to each other? That kind of dovetails into the second one, which is misalignment of goals. Sure. And that kind of being hey, sales is here to bring business to the company, whereas marketing is really there to help attract the best quality leads and get more visibility for the company. And when you say it like that, it truly does kind of make sense. Like, well, why aren't they talking to each other? They're kind of, it sounds like they're aligned, but they do usually have two different goals. And the last part of it that kind of digs into it a little bit too is budget. And sales has a much bigger budget typically, whereas marketing does not. So they have to be very, even though, and it's a weird alignment on that too, because you would think marketing might have a bigger budget because their job is to get and attract a large audience of people, bring them down to a point where they're qualified and get them to sales. So they have a hard time being able to do that with that budget sometimes, and sales has that bigger budget to help them do what they need to do. But I'd say those are like the main ones where it causes sort of that friction or the rough edges there that create sort of that schism between the two.
Yeah. And just to kind of dovetail on your communication point, according to Demand Gen, 50% of marketers and sales executives agree that communication is the biggest challenge in bridging the gap between the departments. So that's really interesting that, it's just talking and understanding where each is coming from, and knowing, marketing's bringing a certain type of lead in, does that correspond with what sales is actually looking for and can close? It seems like that's a big just misunderstanding sometimes on who needs what.
And it's neat too. It's something I always like think about too. It's very interesting, and this is like a point I made in the session that I ran at this great conference called Experience Inbound. But it's interesting because the two really do need each other to do their jobs really well. So sales talks to customers all the time. They know exactly what the pain points are. They know exactly when they're talking and qualifying who those really good fits are. And if sales were to give that information and convey it to marketing could then increase their ability to get better leads and get better qualified leads to sales. So that really is that symbiotic relationship happening, but it just, for some reason, doesn't happen sometimes.
It's like they don't even think about sharing that information, just doesn't even cross their mind. So what happens in an organization when this really doesn't get addressed?
So, I mean, a number of things will happen. I mean, a lot of it will, I've seen a couple instances where it really just creates a really weird internal tension between just employees in general, sort of a reluctance to meet with each other, reluctance to sort of work together. And if it's not really addressed, it just kind of continues to stray apart from each other. And that can obviously affect the bottom line of your business. It also can lead to some really mismatched or weird way that your company is kind of qualifying folks and then getting them to sales. Like it just becomes a more vocal battle between the heads of those departments and the folks that are working underneath them and working with them. It just causes a lot of internal strife, but then that's effectively going to hit your bottom line eventually and just kind of spiral. But it really is just kind of, it slows the cogs and gears of your business to a standstill at some points.
Gotcha. And this probably just really overall, kind of back to your point, creates just a rough experience, for not only internal employees, but probably, the prospects that they're dealing with as well. If they're getting different messages from different departments, different communication styles, that probably causes a little bit of friction there in the sales process.
Very much so. If there's misalignment in what their expectations are from the very start of working with your company or business, and then they get to that situation where they are talking to someone on a more personal level, which is likely that sales rep or BDR, it's going to be a weird experience for them, and it's going to put a bad taste in their mouth. And then that whole, why you put all that effort into getting these folks involved, and especially in this day of age of really wanting to create a personal experience and people seeking that out when they're looking to choose which business to work with or to purchase a product from. They're really looking for that personalized experience. And if they're getting mismatched information and expectations right from the start, then it's going to cause a really hard and kind of rocky road for those people down the road.
Sure. So let's go back to talking a little bit about some of the different roles that sales and marketing has. So we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but when we think about the marketing department and their role and how that differs from sales and kind of where some of this misalignment might come into play, can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I would say, as far as like structure, it's really interesting. I've seen more and more recently, I have seen a sort of marriage of a director of both like sort of marketing and sales. And that is whether that role is sort of working or not, I think that remains to be seen. I see it work in some, I see it not really work because again, there's like that kind of tension of where their goals are aligned. But there's typically sort of a director of sales, and HubSpot is very much like this. It's director of sales and a director of marketing whose responsibility is sort of umbrella under getting, having more visibility for the company and really exploring the different avenues of, as far as the marketing director is concerned, is hey, how are we gaining more visibility and then getting folks through a built funnel of qualification to then get them over to the sales department. Whereas the director of sales is really geared towards how can I really help, meet the expectations and sort of bottom line of what our numbers need to be from a sales perspective to stay profitable, but also to align with new products that were coming out. If you're a services company or someone selling different products or software, and like how we're gaining how we're qualifying those people from them coming in from marketing to make sure that we're able to continue the machine going. From
Sure.
there, typically you'll have in sales departments, like you'll have BDRs who are business development representatives who are sort of there to take those initial folks from the marketing funnel to sort of qualify them a little bit more, do kind of cold outreach, and then you have like your general sort of, it'll kind of, depending on your company makeup, it will kind of gear out into larger enterprise account sales reps, folks who are focused on smaller accounts, and the same sort of thing for marketing. It kind of branches out into,
Okay.
depending on what marketing avenues you're exploring, social, paid, that kind of stuff.
So we talked a little bit about like how each department's kind of got its own goals, kind of has its own, you know, expectations they're trying to hit within their own departments. How do we keep each department accountable for their own pieces, and how do we make that kind of come together in the middle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of it comes down to helping each of the teams sort of recognize that they need each other. Kind of going back to my point on like, hey, marketing would be augmented very much so if sales were kind of regularly updating them on, what are folks' pain points, our top qualified leads that are now customers. What are their pain points? What do they talk about? What are they using? What do they need? If that was regularly kind of communicated to them, then it'll enable marketing to help with creating content that's going to help qualify leads more, because again, it kind of goes back to that point on marketing having a lower budget. They need to attract a large group of people and funnel them down. If sales were to give them information to help them really specifically target and use that money wisely, marketing could create content to then help sales close their leads in a more efficient manner, in a quicker manner. So that is sort of, hey, they're living together. So that's definitely a part of it. As far as like other ways you could sort of bridge that gap and fix it, having a consistent meeting schedule.
I was just going to ask that if you would recommend setting up those meetings. Yeah.
Having like, whether that's, I've seen people try different ways of doing it. So I've seen some folks do like a full kind of company wide, like, hey, sales and marketing are kind of sit together and give feedback and talk about programmatic changes and things like that. But they'll also have a meeting where the sort of directors of the two departments will talk with each other, and they'll have kind of an internal meeting with, hey, marketing, the team will give and enable the director to sort of champion their initiatives, same vice versa for sales, and then they'll kind of meet together to kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of it. But I really do think if you are a company right now who you're feeling like, hey, some of this applies to me, the best thing you can do, the first step, is getting folks consistently meeting and having sort of communication happening between the two.
Gotcha. Do you think it's important for them to kind of agree upon what that ideal prospect is?
Has to be, yeah. They definitely said it needs to be an initiative of both. It can't just be, hey, sales says this, marketing says this. It needs to be a marriage of the two. And a good example of that is, HubSpot's like buyer personas. That should be something that is discussed by both teams, because that is going to paint the most accurate picture, because marketing has their data. They can look at the nuts and bolts of how someone came in, but sales has that more personal touch of, hey, this is, what person X was saying their pain point was, and we noticed that a lot with a bunch of different really high qualified leads. It has to be a marriage of the two, because it's going to paint the most accurate picture for you.
I see. So another kind of interesting stat here as we think about how this really improves companies overall, improves their efficiency. Organizations with tightly aligned sales and marketing team and marketing functions enjoy 36% higher customer retention rate. Is that something that, you've kind of noticed across the board as well?
Yeah. So I mean, that is very much, that's a stat sort of HubSpot looks at very much. It's a way we structure and kind of make choices towards, how should we be making changes and structure to our services department? What should they be, doing to help support both of those teams based on their needs? But across the board, there's no negative effect of those two teams talking. They have to coexist with each other. Like it's only benefit. It's really just, it comes down to like marketing having goal X and sales having, I have to close X amount of deals, and them sort of being lost in their own worlds, and not talking with each other enough. But it's only a benefit to your company.
Sure. So if you had to give any tips around kind of facilitating better communication, what might you say?
So I think the start of it is you need to start meeting on a regular cadence. Like have something where your team, some good baby steps to have this happen, because it's not going to happen overnight, is to get both teams used to the idea of meeting and communicating. Start with matching up one sales rep and one marketing rep to meet together. They don't have to be director level. Just have some one-on-ones kind of start to happen between those two teams, so that they get kind of used to the idea of, hey, let's give feedback to each other. Having a regular cadence of sales and marketing meetings where marketing can communicate and share a content calendar, and sales can give feedback on that content calendar, so that we know, hey, this is really optimized to be the best that it could be. Have sort of a regular cadence on, hey, maybe marketing sends out an email every quarter that gives sales some insight into what that content calendar is going to be. So like having sales being able to ask questions like, who's the content being created for? What buyer persona is it appealing to? What type of asset is it? Is it a blog post, an infographic? So just, again, like kind of tying it back, getting that regular meeting cadence. Some of the other ones I would probably suggest is having a document that is like an SLA, so an agreed upon definitions and responsibilities. So like a good way HubSpot does this, and a way I've helped some of my partners create this process, is by having sort of an Excel sheet, whether it's something like that, goes through all the life cycle stages and sales stages of a client, and then talks about, hey, is marketing responsible for this stage? Is sales responsible? But now it's an agreed upon, it is a documented file, so that it's visible, it's transparent to everyone, and it's agreed upon by sales and marketing as far as who's responsible for what.
Gotcha.
The final two would be creating visibility between your marketing and sales team. So a good way of doing this that HubSpot does is to ensure that sales can kind of easily find and access content that marketing makes. HubSpot, we use like a content library. We also have, like, if you're using Slack as a company, have a shared Slack channel between the two, where marketing can kind of post, hey, here's our plans for these things. Sales can communicate and ask questions there. But that's a really good way to sort of take steps to create visibility. And then the final one would be scalability. So having, starting with the baby steps of those one-on-one meetings between sales and marketing, starting to grow those into bigger meetings, and then deciding, hey, do we want to possibly make other roles that are going to help bridge this gap, such as like a director of lead generation, who's kind of a marriage between the two. Still having your directors of other departments, but starting to plan for scale. How are we going to increase sort of this communication and working together?
And I would think something like an SLA would help when you are adding team members, so they can see clearly what their responsibilities are, who's kind of agreed to what, and what their expectations of their position should be.
Very much so, yeah.
Definitely. Well, awesome. Well, thanks, John, for joining us today. Is there any final closing thoughts before we let you get back to work?
Thank you so much for having me. This is always a pleasure. I'm always happy to come back. As you can tell, I nerd out on this stuff. I was like, throughout that, I was trying to think of a funny joke so that I could meet all of my kind of bio expectations. But I'd say if there's anything I would suggest, you listen to this podcast, you leave here today, you want to, there's a lot of content in this, and there's something you want to sort of take steps to do. It would be, number one, when you write a new article, whether you're the agency owner, like a company owner, whatever the case may be, have your marketing team or whoever's writing that article start to get used to like making a bullet point list depicting why a specific prospect would find that content beneficial. Because now you're helping sales. So sales all the time, like, they're going to be focused on doing what you hired them to do, is selling. So how can you make it easier for them to be able to respond and give feedback to marketing, help marketing create better content so that it creates that better sort of closed loop? Have a bullet point of like, hey, what buyer persona is this for? Why is it valuable? What is it about? So that sales can reference that really quickly and use those in possible sales conversations. So that would be a really good quick win. Number 2 is to set up a meeting between one marketing rep and one sales rep, have them sort of talk together and give feedback to each other. And then final one would be to audit your content library and make a centralized location for where that's stored, so it's a little bit more transparent and visible for your company.
Awesome. Great. I love those quick wins. It always makes you feel good when you can go out and get something done right away.
Easy turnaround ones.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Follow us on social media at MFG Growth Show.